so it should be available for everyone to watch later as well. And can I just ask, and I will say this again once we officially start, but if you have any questions or any comments, if you put them in the Q&A, that will allow us to just keep everything organized and make sure we don't miss anything that might be in the chat. But feel free to use the chat right now, absolutely fine. Yeah, so this is a webinar, so you won't be able to see yourself at all. So if anybody has not used webinar before, what it does is it allows the people kind of on a panel to speak, and it lets everybody else watch and listen and then contribute by submitting questions and comments via the Q&A. So that is totally normal. Okay, so I think we're nearly ready to start. Okay, let's get going. Thank you everyone who has joined us today to the Now You See Me reflection. Let me just firstly say that our original plan had been to have a full one-day event where many of you would have been invited, and that would have been an opportunity for us to share the work created, to talk about the process, and to have some of the young people involved be part of sharing that work as well. Unfortunately, we are all in lockdown at the moment, so that means that we're just having to adjust, and we didn't want to delay sharing our learning from the process of this project any longer. So this is why we are choosing to do this reflection, and hopefully we will leave this kind of conversation with some questions for you, and it'll be something that you can reflect on yourself as well, and maybe we can all work together on some of those learning points. Oh, sorry, I think, there we go, it's fine. Okay, keep going. So my name's Raisa. I myself am an artist as well. I'm a filmmaker. I'm a screenwriter and director. But on this project, I was project managing. And when I came onto this project, it was just called Digital Collaboration. So I was approached by the Scottish Youth Theatre and the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland to come on board and help them shape the project in some way. And I guess the first thing I should be saying is, when I came onto this project, we weren't quite sure what it was going to be. We knew that it was going to be a digital project. We knew that it was going to be a partnership between the two organisations. We knew that it was going to involve artists of colour and young people of colour. But beyond that, we hadn't really thought about what we were going to do with it, what the focus was going to be, and that was deliberate. And the reason that we went around it that way is because my own experiences of working in the arts in Scotland specifically, and the different barriers that we face individually are so varied that it only made sense to get the artists on board and begin that discussion, and allow the artists to shape what the program would look like. So that is how Now You See Me came about. Every part of it in many ways has been devised by our three artists, and they are, as you will see them, and their names pop up on the screen. We have Roman Mundair, who is in Shetland right now. Are you in Shetland at the moment, Roman? You are, yes. And we've got Taj in Glasgow. And we have Lucas, who is in Edinburgh at the moment. You're in Edinburgh at the moment, aren't you, Lucas? Yeah? Yeah, Lucas is always moving around, so I never know where he is. So they have joined us today, and what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about the process, talk about the learning that they got from the process, how it worked with them working with the young people, and then also hopefully take some questions for you guys. So for those of you that joined a little bit later, the Q&A option at the bottom, you should be able to submit questions and comments through that, and that allows us just to keep them together. And what I'll do is I'll aim around kind of 20 past 2 to be and asking some of those questions. So I guess we get started with you guys then. I don't want to take up too much of the talking. I want to let you guys talk. So I guess the most kind of obvious question to begin with is, why did you want to take part in Now You See Me? What drew you to the project? Who would like to start? Any of you? Roman, can I start with you?
Yeah, sure. Well, there were many reasons. It's always fine to be in dialogue and collaborate with folk like Taj and Lucas, and I really valued that. And for me, I was really pleased that Shetland was getting some space to be recognised as a place where people of colour exist, and that there are creative people of colour as well, because that's something that I've definitely struggled with in Shetland, to actually be recognised as having a voice as a Shetlander, to be legitimised as a Shetland creative, and I have an ongoing commitment to nurturing young voices, and particularly voices of colour, young voices of colour, and it all sort of came together for me. It felt like a really important marrying of lots of very important areas that need to be developed.
Great. Taj, should we go to you next?
Yeah, pretty much what Raman said as well, like the collaboration as well with the artists, and you're also meeting new people, learning new things as well. And I am also a youth worker anyway, so getting involved with what young people do is my thing anyways. But also like just working with people of colour, and the point of the project when I was speaking to Mary was like trying to get, you know, young people or people of colour into like theatre or the creative world, and how we can open doors. And also this is a new project, so it's exciting, it's something fresh. We didn't know what was going to happen at the end, you know. I like that kind of uncertainty as well, something that keeps you on your toes a little bit. So all these kind of things is the reason why I wanted to do it, and I enjoy working with young people as well, first and foremost.
Lucas.
Yeah, I think it's interesting for me because I sort of can you hear me okay? Am I clear? Okay, great.
Lucas, is it possible for you to turn up your audio a wee bit?
Let me find the headphone. I had it somewhere before. All right.
Technical difficulties.
Oh, I'll just come closer.
Okay.
You see my face bigger. Yeah. So I think it's interesting that for me to actually to facilitate and teach, and it was an opportunity to meet Taj and Raman, because we're all very, very different, like in our own practice. And then I was a filmmaker before, and now I more make multidisciplinary art. So I wanted to see of my ability to what can I pass to the people, because I also came from a family that encouraged a lot of art. So I also was interested to see what I can bring to the people, to the young people, that tools they can use for that, and to pass it on, to empower them, to unlock, to give them permission to make things, to make a mess or make.
And I guess I should note here that we didn't have a specific outcome for the project. This was, we saw this as a pilot project for something that we hope to grow bigger. But when the artists came on board, we didn't have a specific thing that we wanted them to achieve at the end. We were really kind of focused on what the process was for them as artists, and for the young people, and the discovery that they were going to make. So in many ways, myself, Mary from Scottish Youth Theatre, and Jessie from the Conservatoire, we were leaving it up to fate in some ways, and to the artists to bring something to us. And maybe you guys want to talk a little bit about the different sort of art forms that you come from as well, because you're all very different in the types of art forms that you work with.
I'll start.
Yeah, go for it.
The last one. Yeah, so I'm a self-learned filmmaker and artist. I never went to film school, art school, so everything I've done has been learned through practice or working with other people. But my main medium before was filmmaking. I was a filmmaker for maybe seven years, and then until I started to make a more collaborative, interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary installations or artwork videos, and yeah, so I also do a bit of movement dance as well, and yeah, so a lot of it has been just about unlocking my own creativity and give myself permission to make things in the last few years.
And you chose to do a lot of storytelling in your workshops, Lucas. So Lucas ran the workshops in East Lothian. And can you tell us a little bit about the art form that you chose for your workshops?
I think storytelling is always something that deep in my heart. I really love stories as a child, as an adult as well. I think before a filmmaker, I want to write novels a long time ago. But I think it's about sort of everyone has a potential to create. It's about that, and and storytelling is a game that I use to give them a way in, and then so the workshop I did was I sort of because for me what's important is also everyone's individuality. So I didn't really, as a filmmaker, I didn't really just turn the workshop into a filmmaking workshop, but rather I see who comes, and then I sort of changed my approach. So we did some automatic writing about identity. I asked them to do performing in front of a few of us, only 3 of us, and then I asked them to observe, like do observation in life, and then I asked them to write and create stories, and sort of like make it like a game so everyone can join. There's no barrier in that.
Great. And Raman, you're multidisciplinary as well. So can you talk to us a little bit about the approach you took?
Yeah, I work as a writer and an artist, and as a writer, I work in across forms. I write poetry. I do spoken word. I write for theatre, and I write prose as well, and essays. And as an artist, primarily at the moment, I'm doing a lot of video making, filmmaking, installation, as well as kind of photography. And the thing that marries my process is actually text. So my ways in are always through a text-based, writing-based process. And the sort of way that I worked with the young people was sort of mirroring my own creative process. So I just wanted to take them through a series of workshops where they could experiment and find their voice and find what it is that they want to say in a way that was authentic to them, and also that was honoring their lived experience. So we also had a sense of performance to it as well, a ritual-based performance. So we would create little rituals that were of meaning to us, that were private, and but I would document sort of in an objective way through visual images. And also we did a lot of I suppose storytelling as well, but telling our personal sharing our lived experiences, and we would do that in sort of in the round, and we would record some of it as well. I would record some of it and then reflect that back to the participants, and then we would make pieces of work from it. So yeah, it was a really sensitive and intimate way of working, and I really valued that, and it was really fine to be able to have an authorship of the project as well, as an artist, to be able to devise and to trust my instincts about how I felt best to work with these young people, because I felt it was a real privilege to work with them. It is a real privilege to work with young people, well, to have participants who want to work with you, but specifically these young people in Shetland who oftentimes don't have a voice at all. And and I felt the text-based way in was a really, and the ritual performance-based work was really, really effective.
Great. And Taj, I guess you were the one where we kind of had a sense of what we were going to get because
Yeah,
you're a musician.
yeah.
And how did you find the process of working? Because it's not just about music, making music. It's about getting them to get into the depth of what it is that they want to say.
Yeah, exactly. So the way I usually approach my workshop is quite, I do have a structure, but we all know working with young people does always go to structure, you know, so I usually do have a little structure, but the young people I had, they already had some lyrics that they had written and they wanted to kind of improve on that, wanted to make some beats as well, make some music, so like I beatbox, and I make some beats. I do a wee bit of writing raps and things, but I didn't do much beatboxing in this one, although I showcased it to them. They wanted to make beats and write raps, you know, which is cool. So we delved into a bit of writing and got one of the young people, actually both two young people who made their own music and wrote their own lyrics, you know, and I gave them a space to just kind of experiment. We had like a full day for them to do whatever they wanted to do. You know, it was really nice to see them express themselves. I left inspired as well because one of the young people that came, she was more into writing stories and her art, and she showed me her book full of stories and like the page of art that she'd done. It was absolutely incredible. And then we've got two songs down as well, which were amazing personal songs as well. Hopefully you've listened to them. Just it was that's kind of my process, and just let them go for it, and then any questions they can give me a shout. I also show them some little techniques of what I would use and how to use the software and things like that as well, recording techniques, these little things. But I kind of just let the young people go for it, and then if I can fix anything I will, and just let them go for it. And even the young girl that came in who was writing stories and doing art, she also done a little recording as well, so we managed to get her on the mic, which was really nice. So it's nice to see them kind of grow in that day as well and gain a bit of confidence. And it's hard to express yourself in front of strangers. Like I'd never met them before, and it's quite difficult, especially when you're asking somebody to record something that's personal. You know, that's quite scary. And we're artists. Like I still get nervous sometimes. Someone goes, "Hey, tell me your story." I'm just a bit like, "Oh, okay," you know, or record this. Can you do that now? So the fact that they done it is amazing.
I mean, I think that takes us really nicely into this idea of safe spaces. So taking it back a little bit, role models and seeing people like yourselves in the arts is really important. And that's one of the things that we were really focused on when we were thinking about this project. And how rare it is often for these young people to see someone that looks like them. You know, in the industry, they might see someone that's slightly more similar to them, but often they don't see someone that they can kind of point at and go, oh, I think that person has maybe the same experiences as me or the same language as me, or, you know, things like that. And do you think that being someone that they felt that they saw themselves reflected, even just visually, allowed you to create more of a safe space for them much more quickly? Do you think that impacted the work that you created in the short space of time? Because just to let everyone know, we had a very limited amount of time. The artists were given a certain number of days they could work over, and that meant that the workshops were either 1 day long or a few days that were half days. So really the artists decided how they wanted to work themselves. How do you feel that being someone of color, working with young people of color, impacted the content that was created?
I'll go first. I mean, I think it did impact it because when I listened to the track that I made, I forgot the girl's name now, sorry.
Chaya.
Chaya, yes,
Yeah.
Chaya was very good because in that, I think in her lyrics, she says that she's telling her parents she wants to be an artist or a musician, and they're a bit like, why? You know, and I think it's cool that Lucas, your family, you were saying they encouraged the arts, but sometimes in like Indian, Pakistani backgrounds, they don't really encourage it as such. You know, it's okay to do it, but you know, do something else, which is fine. I think it's okay for parents to tell their kids to be doctors and lawyers. Like these are all great careers, but also I think it's good to encourage them to get into the arts as well. There's no harm in doing a few things. So with Chaya being there and me being there, I think maybe she could say that because I don't think a lot of people understand, like, why would your parents say no for you to follow your passion? You know, I think some people find that hard to hard to understand. So I think she's put that across, and I understand it. You know, not that I was ever stopped as such. You know, like my mum and dad, they encouraged me as well. But I know a lot of young people of colour have stopped because the parent says, "Why do you want to be an actor? You know, why don't you be a lawyer?" or things like that. I've seen that happen. So I think for Chaya to be there with a person of colour, she can express herself, or any young people of colour can express themselves when they know that I can relate to that as well. And I relate to whatever they were writing. So it is important, therefore. And it is, I also grew up with nobody in like mainstream media with a turban and a beard. Like even now when I think back, actually it's strange that you mentioned it, because the past few weeks I have been thinking that as well. There was nobody. You can't even turn to Bollywood for that, because anytime they wanted to portray a Sikh person, they would hire in some actor who wasn't a Sikh and didn't have a turban or beard. They would just stick a fake beard and a turban on them. So I understand growing up and not seeing him when it looked like me, and that sort of turned me to rap music and looking up to like basically like black artists. That's a conversation one for later on.
that's a whole other conversation.
I won't go off on a tangent, don't worry. That's a whole other tangent.
Sometimes tangents are interesting. And what about you guys, Lucas and Raman? How did you feel that that you being the artist leading it, and someone that maybe has shared experiences with the young people you're working with, how do you think that impacted the quality of the work that they created in such a short space of time?
Well, I mean, definitely, I felt that the level that we began the conversation at was, really profound and really meaningful. And the reality is that, when people of color, when there is a white gaze, in any form, we do interact differently, and it's the same the other way around as well to a certain extent. And I think the quality of the conversation and the subject matter and even the way that we may choose to devise and create something, really changes when the dynamics in the room are very specific. And so having folk about you that who aren't necessarily totally mirroring your lived experience, but have some empathy and some understanding, and have some commonality with you, makes a massive difference. And representation matters. So for me, I think the imagination is a powerful thing, but the way that it develops in us as young people, as children, and then as young people, is that we, for example, when we're watching a film or when we're seeing a piece of art or whatever it is, we place ourselves in that in that gaze. We place ourselves. We try and imagine being in that role, in that position, in that film, experiencing what that character experiences in that book. You get my point. And if that person, it's a leap of imagination when that person doesn't look like you, when that person doesn't speak like you, when that person, there's such a vast chasm between you. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen, but there's a big leap. And I think psychologically there's a cost in that as well. So I feel like when we start to work in this way, where there's a sensitive approach, an understanding approach, there's an ethical approach, there's a more there's more equality of opportunity, then that also the psychological processes change. So more of ourselves turn up. And that's what I felt with the young people that I work with, that they felt they were willing to take more risks possibly than they might have done in other situations. And certainly that's been my experience as well, when I've been in situations where I can have autonomy, when I can have a sense of feeling in control and feeling that the power dynamics are not something that oppresses me.
And yourself, Lucas?
Yeah, I think role model is so important, because when I was dedicated to filmmaking, I always look for, okay, who's a filmmaker? Is there an East Asian filmmaker in UK? And I was really disappointed until like the film Lilting came out. It's funded by, anyway. So I was always look for someone similar that I can look up onto. And I'm totally with Raman about safe spaces, because it's really important to sort of yeah, so to be in a space and also to be create a space for other people so they can feel and express and take up risk, like you said. And I think the other thing that came to my head is that yeah, because I mean, there's like one men's circle, women's circle. I mean, why not a circle for BME artists in, you know, in it should be everywhere in that sense, so that we can talk about our shared common experiences, and without the gaze, like Roman said. And I think the other thing that came to my head is also like when I, at least in the 2-day workshop, I try to be the same level as them. I'm not like, it's not like a top-down level. I tell them what to do. It's like I'm with them. I do the same exercises as them. We do it together.
Yeah.
So it's about how do we. So it's not like a role model as a hero, but more like we're the same. I was the same as you before, and now I can show you tools I use, and then maybe to bring you forward. And yeah, so I think that to have that equality with the young people, because they are all adults, young adults as well. They are all very intelligent, and they also have gone through a lot of structural racism in UK that sort of suppress their creativity, I think, in many ways.
So you're taking away that sort of power dynamic, and you're just ensuring that in that room you're all equal. So it's not like a teacher pupil relationship sort of thing. It's we are all artists. We are all here to share our experiences. And you felt that helped really draw out more from the young people you were working with.
I think there's also, sorry.
No, go for it, Roman. Go for it.
I was also going to say there's something here, Lucas, that I really feel in what you're saying about the pedagogy of working and creating and the process. And also the fact is that, you know, as you were saying, you were there as an equal. It's also even if you were there as a teacher or someone who's, you know, sharing a level of experience, when you're there, you know, without that kind of history, without that kind of cultural dynamic of actually, of colonization, basically, if that isn't present in the room in a way that's, you know, here's this white person about to tell you something, how to do this thing, it really shifts things. It really shifts the way you see yourself and your esteem around the work you're making and your process as well. So all of that is something that I'm very mindful of, and I'm reminded of when Lucas shared what he did just then, which was really important.
Yeah, and the other thing I think what Scottish Youth Theatre and RCS was great for us is that they gave us a room just for 4 of us, and then at the beginning on the first workshop where we can just talk about what we want to do, and then sort of come out with a plan-ish idea to proceed and still have control so we can adapt to situations. Yeah, I think I'm really, really grateful for that.
And I think that's what we're talking about in terms of safe spaces. So that conversation was had right at the start, where the question was asked about how do you as artists want to work together? Who do you want in the room? That question was asked of you, and the response was respected, and that's the way in which we continued with the project. And I think that to their absolute credit, Scottish Youth Theatre and the Royal Conservatoire have been absolutely brilliant in pushing forward all of us in saying, take your power and tell us what that power should be. If we're doing something that you feel doesn't work, then you need to tell us. And in taking on board that learning and creating that change. And I think that's one of the key aims of this project, was for both organisations to ask questions of themselves about the power dynamics within the organisations, about why more artists of colour aren't working with them, why more young people of colour aren't engaging with them. And we really have interrogated that ourselves, and you know, bringing them into the conversation and really interrogating those questions. Maybe we should talk a little bit about how we feel some of this learning that you've had as artists through this process has changed your approach in any way. Do you feel that going through this process with these organizations that you may not have been through a similar process in the past as artists. Has this changed the approach that you might take when working with other people in the future? Has it changed your own kind of practice in any way? Anyone want to jump in? I know I'm throwing the heavy questions at you, haven't I?
I think I'll go ahead. I think I just
Yeah.
it's really great to because on the last we also before the lockdown, we three of us also meet together, and we had a day where we sort of look at what we made, and then and trying to see if we can create something from all the different materials. And it's nice to have that day of mashing together, three of us, and trying to combine that. So I definitely open for more collaboration like that, and I think that's really a beautiful way to wrap up the project. And I think what I'm really take away from the project is that I have more confidence in workshops, in delivering workshops. I definitely have the tools to pass on to people. And then I'm like at the moment I'm doing I'm volunteering as a mentor for an artist in Edinburgh at the moment. So like that's definitely something that I took on board, that I can help other people in a creative way.
And had you ever worked in that way where you aren't the only artist of color in the room and, you know, working on a specific project? Do you find that when you're working with other organizations that you may be the only artist of color there?
I think, yeah, it's all the time. Like basically, if you walk into a room, one of the things I firstly do is like, okay, is there any person of color here? And there's, there's usually quite, I mean, usually within one hand, actually. And yeah, so yeah, it's really nice to have this opportunity to meet. And yeah, I don't know what to say. I don't know.
Can I ask you a question on that?
Yes.
How does that impact what you share in that room? If you walk into a room and there's very few artists of color, and it's kind of going back on Roman's point as well, about those safe spaces and having people that may understand you through a different lens. As artists that have been working in your respective kind of fields for quite a while now, do you still find yourselves really impacted by going into a room and feeling like you really stand out because of the way that you look, the color of your skin, your experiences, all of that?
For me, it definitely does. I mean, but also my experience as an immigrant is that I come when I was 16, so I don't actually go through a lot of the structural racism that young people grow up here with. So my experience are different, which I realize that. But I feel like I wouldn't be able to speak up as much, I guess, if I feel like I'm the only, or there's a few other people. Yeah, and then that's one of the strongest thing that came to me just now. Yeah. But that's a whole conversation.
Roman?
I just wanted to say something about, you know, I think it's really important to not assume that when you invite, you know, a group of people of color artists, or a group of people of color, just in general, that we all have the same lived experience, or we all have the same thing to say, that we all have the same starting point. And certainly as artists, the three of us, we came from very different places and very different ways of working and seeing the world. And I think one of the errors that a lot of arts organizations make, and I feel they need to be more sensitive to, is assuming that there's some sort of conglomerate sort of identity, you know. And I think it's really important to recognize, particularly actually one of the things that I'm really passionate about with South Asian artists is also like class and caste play a big part. Like I really strongly identify as a working class artist, and you know, I come from a peasant family in India. And I've as a poet, for example, I've been on panels alongside other South Asian poets, who have grown up with servants and, you know, a totally different lifestyle to me, but we're supposed to be all Asian together and somehow share this common identity and have this common voice. And I felt actually I've got more in common with somebody who's of working class heritage than I do with someone who's middle class South Asian, for example. And these sorts of things are really important. And particularly, you know, in terms of like class is such an issue in Scotland and in the UK in general, and rarely talked about in a way that's valuable, really. And I think, you know, when looking at kind of, you know, people of colour, there is caste and class at play there as well, not just within Indian and Pakistani cultures or Bangladeshi cultures, but also I know, you know, with my, you know, fellow artists who have African heritage, you know, they have similar things going on where, you know, the lived experience is not, you know, you can't assume that everyone has this, is coming from the same place. And I think we need more subtle conversations, and we need more space to have these conversations. And I think that the white gatekeepers, and they are sadly predominantly white, need to have that awareness that you can't, you know, you can't just assume that everybody is the same, and you can't just assume that, you know, if you have a panel of South Asian artists that you know, they're all coming from the same place. And also, you know, I feel like there needs to be some more proactiveness. You need to look at the work, you need to look at where people are coming from, you need to have a conversation and understand where, you need to be more, you know, schooled up and clued up and more engaged and not passive in your understanding of the wide range of, you know, Scottishness and Britishness, you know, that's in your world.
I think that a lot of the points that you're making around class, especially, and how that impacts different people coming from different sort of backgrounds, has actually really been highlighted with what's going on currently as well, because it's been really interesting to see the breakdown of the people that have been impacted by coronavirus and how poverty and class links into that, as well as how your ethnicity, those sort of backgrounds link into that as well. So I do wonder if once we start to come out of what we're in right now, how artists are going to respond to that, and how a lot of artists that come from those very different sort of class systems that have never really been spoken about before are going to use that, and what opportunities are we going to create to allow that to happen, because those are the conversations, like you're saying, that do need to happen. Taj, I feel like we haven't heard from you in a little bit, and you had made a point, oh, you're still on mute, so you'd made a point earlier around safe spaces, and so right at the start, when we had that session where it was the four of us in a room, and we made that really conscious decision, we had that conversation around, does it need to be just the four of us? Should we not be inviting in the gatekeepers to be part of this conversation? And you'd had a bit of a reflection on that, hadn't you?
Absolutely. Thanks to Lucas and Raman, who introduced me to Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race. And that book kind of opened my eyes, actually, and maybe realise why we need safe spaces. And I didn't notice, or I didn't realise that in the past I have worked in these kind of spaces, but I didn't know why, I suppose, and the kind of deeper meaning into it, and how you can just be open and express yourself with people who do have kind of similar experiences. So working on this project that's the one thing I have really actually learned, and why there is that kind of, why we need our own space. And like I was saying earlier, when I work in a prison as well, and you know, I work with a few groups, but one group is predominantly people of colour, you know, and they need that safe space, because it's hard to talk about their issues when you've got people drawing swastikas everywhere, you know, and still have that kind of stereotype, I guess you could say, of people of colour. And so safe spaces, or, you know, places for us people of colour to come together, throw ideas down, or just talk as well, is very important in this. I suppose that's something that I didn't really see. I didn't think about it as much until this project. So it has been an eye-opening experience, and I'm very thankful for that, actually, you know. And I think future projects is something like comes up like this again, I understand why we need it, and before I didn't.
What's the book that everyone should be reading?
Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race.
Okay, so if you've not read that,
Yes,
get that
everyone
on your
read
read list.
it.
Get that on your read list. So we do have a couple of questions, and they are, one's quite big, another one's more focused on the project. So we'll start with the smaller one. How would you enrich the storytelling process if you had more time? So if you had the opportunity to make what you'd done bigger, what are the elements that you feel that you could have done more of? Is there anything you felt that you couldn't do? Was there anything about the process or even aftercare? Do you feel like these young people needed a bit of mentoring afterwards? Anything like that you feel? I mean, you might be doing that informally anyway. But yeah, I think it'd be really interesting to hear if you feel that there's anything you missed or you would do more of.
I do keep in touch with the young people that came to the workshop. Like there's a filmmaker from Thailand who's studying in Edinburgh, so I passed him links about upcoming opportunities, and then yeah, I do try to. I think this is more a starting point maybe of this relationship, which I'm hoping that will continue, and then and I think if there's more time, what I really like it would be nice to have an exhibition, because it's actually really. I did a workshop in prison as well before, but with photography, and then it was so nice to see the participants making work and then show it to people, and then they being proud and talk about their work. So being a teacher is not really about the work they make, it's about seeing them explaining very passionately about the work they make to their friends and family. So I think it'll be really nice to have that as in like a platform to showcase what's been made, and then yeah, and also just more time to play about different ideas, I guess, and see what everyone needs, because everyone will have a different need, I think.
Anyone else want to come back on that one? Anything else Taj or Roman would have done?
I think Lucas has pretty much summed it up, really.
Yeah. Okay.
I feel like Lucas was saying, like I really felt with my with the work that I undertook with the young people, it was a start, it was a beginning, and I felt we just started to, it was the tip of the iceberg. There was just so much underneath, and I think we needed for more of it to come through. You need sort of concentrated periods of time and space, because it's actually to make sure that the stories that emerge are complex, and they're not just one note narratives, and they're not a single story. So yeah, I feel very strongly about that. And also in terms of my own practice as an artist, this is it's a rare situation to be able to have autonomy, and I want more of it. And I also think that it's important to have conversations about the kind of conversation we're having now on different levels, including like how do we become gatekeepers? How do we get into positions where we start commissioning work and making space for ourselves? Because the reverse, never happens. We don't have white people talking about, oh, how do we get into positions of power? Or how do we get our work commissioned? Because it's just not an issue, and that's global. Because it's also about when you do have a voice, whose story is listened to. When I think about the writers of Indian heritage in the UK and also from India, they're predominantly high caste, the equivalent of upper middle class, British people, English people, and that's not really representative of the South Asian Indian experience.
No. Okay. And just off the back of this question, another one that's come through is, do you think that the participants that you worked with will go further with their arts practice?
I hope so. I really hope so. I mean, but then I think maybe just to briefly talk about what I did in the workshop. So I asked them to do automatic writing. So it's more about giving them tools and permission, like I said. So I asked them to do automatic writing, which is just you write nonstop for 15 minutes. It's a good way of unburden your mind. And then the other thing I asked them is to draw whatever they like. So yes, not really thinking about the outcome, and it's more about enjoying the process rather than thinking that you have to achieve something at the end. And I think that's an important mindset is to play, to have that space to explore. And I do hope they take the playing away. And then I think the other thing I did with them is identity work. So it's something I took away from a show I'm making. Basically, I asked them to write maybe like 20, 30 list of your own identity. So I'm male. I was born in July. I was born in Taiwan. I live in Edinburgh, and all of this as a list that is a tool for them to reflect. So I do hope they took that tool away, and yeah, I also asked them to perform as well. So hopefully give them like more confidence. Yeah.
I mean, I definitely think that, you know, I really hope that the young people I worked with, I know that at least a handful of them will definitely continue with the journey. And what I hope that they have also taken away is that when I was thinking about when I came up with the name of the project, Now You See Me, it was also a provocation. You know, it wasn't just about, yeah, now you see me. I was also thinking about, what does it take to be seen? What does it take to be witnessed? What does it take to be heard? And I feel that certainly with the young people I worked with, that was also very much the kind of headspace we kept ourselves in, which was, you know, constantly sort of interrogating that. What does it take for you to see me? What does it take for me to be witnessed? And that's something that I think is a really important question with the work that we've done as well.
Taj?
Yeah, I think Chaya, who had done a rap, I think she's already in a band. She plays drums and things, so I think she will be continuing on with her practice. The same with I think it's Miriam who did the stories and the books and things. She's doing pretty successful, pretty well with that. It's also nice. It would have been nice to have had them in here, or
Chaya's here. Chaya's listening in.
Chaya. But also, it'd be nice for everyone to meet up as well, everyone who participated in the project, so you can bounce ideas off each other as well, and like kind of help each other to progress and push forward with what they've learned. And if they have any other questions or want to learn something, they can always give us all a wee shout as well. But I see bright things ahead for everyone.
I mean, and I think that's one of the big things, isn't it? It's once these young people start working with you, and I've felt this myself in work I've done with young people in the past, I'll still hear from them every so often. I'll get an email and it'll be, can you read this for me, or do you have a bit of advice on this? And so it's not just about those workshops specifically, it's about that relationship that's built, and it's about that sort of informal mentorship that keeps happening over the years. And it might be it's just one conversation once a year, but sometimes that's all you need. You just need someone to remind you why you're doing what you're doing. So I think that's quite important. So we've got loads of questions coming in now. So let me go through this. So there's one here around, so firstly they've said, thank you for sharing your learning with us today. Roman raises a really clear point, a really key point about diversity of experience and the intersection of class and race. How can we start, as we clearly need to radically decolonize the structures of our arts institutions and decolonize our thinking? How can we open up spaces and discourse around these complex intersections and dismantle power dynamics? Ooh. Roman likes that question.
That's a big question.
Like that very much, and it's a question that I sit with, you know, I think it's the background hum to my headspace creatively. And I don't have, you know, an answer. I have an instinct, and the instinct is that we, you know, it needs to be a collective approach, and it needs to involve all of us. We need to, that meaning, you know, across the intersections, across the cultures, across the identities. We all need to be there, and those of us with power we need to be willing to give it up. We need to be able to share it. We need to be able to enable those who don't to have a voice and to take up space. And that's a difficulty because, I mean, from personal experience, I've frequently encountered white gatekeepers who are liberal and say all the right stuff, but they're not willing to give up their power. They're not willing to share the power. They're not willing to facilitate a space for me, you know, and or others. So it's a complex question. It's one that should be given space, a big space. It shouldn't be, you know, just a 5-minute answer.
Mm-hmm.
I think it should be honoured and approached collectively and intersectionally.
Absolutely, thank you. I mean, it's a massive question. We could be here for a couple of hours just discussing those points, I think. But I do agree. It's a collective issue. It's everyone's issue in many ways, and it is about fixing that power dynamic, isn't it? In many ways. So, a really easy one that I can quickly answer for you. How did you choose who to reach out to as young participants, and why? So our artists all live in very different areas, and so some of that outreach was done through the contacts that they have themselves, and that was varied depending on the artist and the location, and we did some of the outreach through Scottish Youth Theatre and the Conservatoire. And we did the usual sort of advertising. So we used Instagram a lot with it being a digital project, and we put a lot of the kind of advertising over Instagram and used that. And it's word of mouth. And I feel that with a lot of these projects where you're accessing communities that don't normally engage with the arts, they won't necessarily respond to a leaflet that they get through the door or an advert they see online. It does often have to be that word of mouth, and it does often have to be coming from a source that they trust. And it can be a little bit of encouragement that's needed to get them to engage. And that's where our artists are key, because I think it goes back to that role modeling. Do you guys have anything to add to that? No? Agree? Okay. So another one, Raman, this one is another one for you. Based on your statement regarding individualism and conglomerate, do you think that the terms such as people of colour and BAME is misleading because everyone is thought to be the same? And if so, what can we do about that?
Question. Absolutely. I mean, they're problematic terms. We don't really have a language that's fit for purpose, in my opinion. And I think a lot of these terms that we're left with are highly problematic, and definitely we need a conversation. But again, it's a collective thing, you know, that we need to look at the origins of some of these phrases. I mean, BAME means nothing to me. I mean, what does that mean? People of colour, it's interesting because I know it's a co-opted term from America, but I feel in terms of its genesis, and you know, it comes out of a very specific intersectional Black feminist conversation that took place, an excellent conference that took place, if anybody is interested in the history, and that's where the phrase was termed, women of colour and people of colour. And so I feel I have more resonance with that because I feel it comes from a really important conversation, and it came from the desire to try and make space for as many people as possible with a shared lived experience. But BAME, I feel, is really needs to be decolonized. It's for me, it's very much reeks of the very British need to pigeonhole, and it's certainly something that I feel is really doesn't really hold the breadth and subtlety of people's lived experience, people of color's lived experience. Yeah, so it's a again, it was a very big question. Yeah, and it's very hard for me to respond in full, except to say, you know, what I really need to end with is saying that I have very complex feelings about it, and I think that there needs to be a lot more dialogue about it. Yeah.
Do either of you want to come back on that, Taj or Lucas?
I think Rahman covers it pretty well. I think, yeah, I can't say better than.
No, I know.
Okay.
I agree that beam thing as well. I don't really get it. And at first, I was a wee bit like, people of color. Then I was like, yeah, I can get down with people of color, but this whole your beam, I'm like,
what does that mean? Yeah.
What does that mean? I'm beam. You're part of beam. You know, people of color. I like that. Do you know what I mean? I don't know why. It just kind of, it's nice. It just sounds nice. It sounds like a nice collective of people. Beam is just like beam. It's just too. I agree with them.
Great. Okay, so let me give you an easier one now. What were the biggest obstacles you had to face during the project? Could be anything. I mean, did you feel that you found many obstacles, or did you feel that because you had the freedom to kind of shape what you were doing, that made your life a lot easier?
I think having the freedom always helps, you know, and sometimes, you know, with young people, and you give them a structure, they don't want that structure because it's not school, you know. And I think just having that freedom and going in, I think I was lucky. I had some great young people who were really willing to go in and engage with it, which made it kind of easy. There wasn't any obstacles as such for myself, but I think having that freedom really helped.
I experienced some challenges, and I identify those challenges as coming from a space where you're working in a community that identifies itself as predominantly white. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't really recognize that there's diversity within it, and that is a very specific challenge in itself. And I think it's to do with the identity of Scottishness and the identity of Englishness and Britishness. It's still contested territory. It's still something that's tricky to maneuver in. Specifically, in my case, when I'm looking at a rural community, I mean, the idea of rural spaces is still sort of about whiteness, attached to whiteness, and this is something that I've written about quite a lot, and I'm interested in this sort of contested areas of identity and this idea of whiteness. And so the challenges that I faced was actually, for example, trying to enroll the Shetland High School to recognize that the project was of value, and to engage with us to try and find suitable participants. And I was saddened to find that the initial response to the project was like, well, actually, it's not really a value to us. Don't recognize it as being a priority or something that's groundbreaking, which I felt lacked imagination.
Right, and what about you, Lucas? Any big obstacles?
Similar to Rahman, because my place was actually East Lothian, which is outside Edinburgh, and I don't know East Lothian very well at the beginning, so I have to do a lot of research to find out, okay, where could the young people be, and then we end up having to find people more outside of Edinburgh in the end. But it was a really good research to get to know the area, and then to be aware that because I've been living in Edinburgh for quite a long time now, and I already moved out, so it's nice to know that there is definitely more opportunities there. Yeah, and then
okay. I think we have time for one more question. We've got 7. I'm going to go with this one. Do you ever feel the pressure to be a good representative of a person of colour in the arts? Can that become counterproductive? And if so, how do you navigate that?
I want to start answering that question with there's a film called Queen and Slim. It's an American film by an American black a woman artist director, and then in that film there's one line that I love. It's basically a conversation between the two characters, and then basically the line is that why as why do we have to be so excellent as person of color? Basically, why do we have to always overachieve? And why can't we just be who we are? So I mean, yeah, that for me that was an important way of thinking. But I think we do have to be role models in a way that I don't know how to express that. Maybe can I come back to that?
Yeah, of course.
Hmm. Hmm.
Roman or Taj, do you feel that you have to be the perfect role models, and is it counterproductive to your art?
I think this, for me, immediately when I hear this question, it's really about the age-old issue of the good immigrant and the conversation going on about that. And again, it's something that I've written about, and on a personal level, I refuse to engage with it. I understand it's there, and it's part of the waters that we swim in. But for me, as an artist, of course, it must be affecting me. But I try consciously not to let that be the framework for me. But of course, it will have some impact in some way.
Taj, do you want to come in at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a bit of pressure because, as you know, when a person of colour does something wrong, it blows up in the media, and that community is straight away targeted. If a Muslim person does something wrong, it's all in the hell, Muslims bad. Sikh person done this, Sikh are bad. White person does it, oh, you had mental health issues, or fella needs to go in the hospital. I think there is a pressure, and like myself as well, like I'm very noticeable. I'm 6'5". I wear a turban. I got a big beard. I do one mistake, like that's it. They're going to see me. Not that I want to go out and do mistakes, but I'm very, very recognizable. So, I feel like as people of colour, we need to be a wee bit careful what we do because it always reflects back on our communities, unfortunately, and that's just the way it is at the moment. And and it needs to change. And one person doing bad shouldn't reflect the whole community. But as you have all seen, like I said, in the media, it blows up and the whole community is bad.
Great. Thank you. Yes, of course, Roman.
I just wanted to say, just kind of adding to what Lucas and Taj were saying, that it's important to remember the intersections of this. So, for example, as a woman of color, the level of judgment and is on another. It's just another kind of world entirely. And then if you identify as being queer, obviously that's another kind of issue, and it's all quite intense, and we need to be mindful of those intersections. So if you're a queer woman of color, the way that you're going to be seen and judged within community is very it's loaded.
It's very complex. Yeah. Okay, so that's us hitting 2:00, and that means that we've kind of come to an end for our time. We still have loads of questions we could have answered, but what I'll do is I'll share them with our panelists and see if there's another way in which we can answer some of those questions. And panelists, please have a look at the chat. There's some really lovely comments there. Before we go, what we would like to do is, for all of you listening, is throw out a couple of questions. And I think that these are questions that if you have organizations you work with, if you have any sort of position of power, they're really important questions. And what we'll do is we will share this webinar on our Instagram account, and we will also ensure that the questions are available there as well. So quite a few questions here. So firstly, how many artists of color have you or your organization worked with in the past? How many individual projects have you had with more than one artist of color working on them? How do you, in your position, give up your privilege to give power to artists of color? How many people of color are in leadership or gatekeeper positions in the organizations that you work with or for? And this also includes boards as well. So what does a board of your organization look like? How can organizations invite more artists of color to apply for open applications? So what have you been doing to ensure that the people applying for positions come from diverse backgrounds? How can you create a safe space for artists of color to work and create authentically without fear of censorship? And that can also mean self-censorship, like we've spoken about today. So how do you allow them to feel free to really put their art out there? And finally, how do you respond to artists of colour who are rewriting pre-existing narratives that have only ever had one viewpoint and are challenging audiences in this way? So those are our questions to you. And we would love to hear responses from you. So you can get in touch with either myself on nationalprojects@scottishyouththeatre.org, or when this video is up on our Instagram account, you can leave us comments on that as well. Thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thank you, Raisa. Thank you.